Hi there, welcome to a review of Xenogears, the 1998 PS1 RPG released by Square in their absolute prime. The game was a pretty big success in its time, and has been listed as the 16th best game of all time by Famitsu magazine readers. This game is infamous for throwing Freudian and Nietzschean overtones at the player, along with giant robots in a long and winding story. It's this story that proves to be both the greatest and worst thing about Xenogears, but I'll get to that in due time. The game follows the adventures of Fei Fo Wong, an orphan young adult brought into a village at a young age. He's a talented artist, a skilled martial artist, and suffers from amnesia like everybody else in RPGs for some reason. Anyways, also standard for most RPGs, your peaceful town doesn't last more than an hour, but without spoiling anything, Xenogears easily has one of the most shocking and maybe best beginnings to any role-playing game ever. You just have to play to see what I mean. Fei has to set out on a quest to recall his memory and to save the world from an ancient organization. Along the way, he meets a young female soldier named Ellie. Pro tip: the first girl the protagonist meets in an RPG is the one that he'll probably get it on with by the end. But wait, doesn't Chrono's mom the first woman you meet in Chrono Trigger? Oh, okay, the first hot single girl. But Chrono doesn't have a father, so his mom is single. The first hot single girl who's not related. Forget I said anything. You also recruit a tough prince, a scientist who you can tell is smart because he's got glasses, a mutant, a little girl, and... oh, dear God. I'm actually going to jump to the gameplay first and leave the story and characters for last, because that's where I have the most to say. Xenogears contains typical RPG gameplay, with a normal level up system and a lot of dungeons in this gigantic and varied world map to explore. The only real deviation from the norm in terms of exploration is the ability to jump while navigating. This can be pretty awkward given the PS1's limitations, but it was still kind of cool to see them even attempt this kind of platforming. And they lead you into battles, complete with special moves, magic-like abilities, and more. However, the cool thing is that attacks could be comboed together, as you can choose which maneuvers to perform or just make your own. The regular battles were pretty fun, and also managed to give the player a reasonable challenge, as it could really test your strategical skills. The second type of battles that were really cool were the giant robot battles, a big selling point of the game. You fight in these incredibly superior mechs, with the main difference being a clever fuel system that forces the player to balance conservation with offense. This 60-hour quest or so, coupled with only a few minor flaws like some weak puzzles and an annoying equipment system, make the gameplay in Xenogears worth the price of admission. The graphics in the game were pretty good, with some amazing anime cutscenes and designs from the makers of Evangelion, which I felt that this game took a lot of inspiration from. Although the character sprites look pretty dated, the robot animations and locations do an admirable effect to compensate, as you visit dozens of extremely memorable locations. The music in Xenogears is legendary. I would expect nothing less from the musical genius behind Chrono Trigger and Cross, Yasunori Mitsuda. Almost every single song from the game is memorable to those who've played it, and pieces like June Mermaid, Tears of the Stars, and many more just add to this incredible experience. Okay, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of Xenogears, the infamous story. Xenogears has an incredibly large story that spans over 60 hours. The makers of this game referred to it as the 5th episode of 6 in an extremely ambitious project to create this sort of universe of games that would rival even Final Fantasy. The story in the game can be deep, rich, exciting, and thought-provoking, but at other times it could be rushed, poorly paced, and frustrating. Many say Xenogears has the best RPG story on the PS1. So where do I stand as an avid RPG gamer? Well, to me, there's a fine line between a story that's deep and one that's labyrinthian, and Xenogears did cross that sacred line. See, in a game like Persona 4, there's a very winding and deep story involved, but the pace is well set, and they make sure that the player is given many opportunities to understand just what the hell is going on. This isn't the case with Xenogears. As the story unfolds here, many things start to happen in the background that aren't very well explained, and this only spirals further and further until the average player can miss the entire thing and lose interest. Sure, some people call it genius and say that people just don't get it because it's so deep, but I see this as an excuse, because a good story includes pacing and explanations rather than just content and hoping that the player will tie it all together themselves. I feel like the developers really bit off more than they can chew with this story, because they had a limited budget and clearly tried to throw everything they could at this game. It's actually rumored that Xenogears was supposed to be on 4 discs, but the lack of funds limited the game to only 2 discs. A 60-hour RPG on 2 PS1 discs. That's like trying to play piano with your elbows. The story on the first disc was well paced and linear, but the second disc features characters telling us things instead of actually showing it. Crack.com put it best by saying Xenogears went from being one of the best games on the PS1 to the best slideshow on the system. For a good chunk of the second disc, characters sit in a chair and reminisce about the story instead of telling it, in a clear effort to shove 4 discs worth of content into one. I feel like my grandpa's in a rocking chair telling me a freaking story. Who the hell wants to play that? Characters also go through their existential crises here. So yes, again like Evangelion. The characters themselves were fun and interesting, with Faye and Ellie obviously getting the most screen time. However, some of the latter characters are just introduced, get an hour in the spotlight, and then we never really hear them talk again. The characters themselves are great and really interesting to watch. Anyway, as weird as it sounds, I would have rather that they focused more on the characters driving the story rather than vice versa, as it would have made a stronger final product. Really though, it's small little missteps like that litter Xenogears' closet. Okay, let me say this right now. I do like Xenogears. The story had a lot of great twists and thought-provoking ideas. Most of the characters are memorable and likable. It offers an amazing world to explore. The battle system was well done, the graphics did their job, and the music was nothing short of amazing. However, the story was not fleshed out quite as well as it could have been with more time, and the pacing was nothing less than terrible in the second disc. The issues in Xenogears can be attributed to the developers biting off more than they can chew, and having a budget that was cut way too short. This game deserves to be on 4 discs. The worst thing about it is that the series never really learned their lesson with this one. On the PS2, they released a spiritual sequel trilogy to this game, the Xenosaga series. There were 6 planned games, but they cut them to 3. But more on that another time. So, to conclude, many gamers refer to Xenogears as the best RPG on the system, and maybe of all time. To me, it can never be given that prize because it's incomplete. It can be brilliant, passionate, but it's not a finished project. Again, Xenogears is like the video game equivalent of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Some people call it a masterpiece, while other people say it's a pretentious piece of crap. However, like Evangelion has gotten updated with the rebuild movies, Xenogears deserves a remake more than any other game I can think of. If this game had the time to flesh out its story with a much better translation, it might be one of the best RPGs of all time. In its current state, I still wholeheartedly recommend the game if you can pick it up. It's fairly cheap and accessible on the PlayStation Network, and although it could be considered a flawed product that will never be one of my favorites, its quality can't be denied, as Xenogears is a must for any RPG gamer. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to our next random encounter.